Okay, let me start over. Uh, so the reason I am doing this is that a few weeks ago, I was teaching the current cohort of the melodic math course, and I realized I'd been so wrapped up in teaching and a couple other things that I was kind of out of the loop on the songs that have been recently released and are doing well. And so I decided to check out the Billboard Hot 100, and I saw a song that was atop of the chart and it was number one. And I had not heard of that song, and I fortunately had not heard of the artist, and that was Alex Warren's "Ordinary." So I decided to check out that song, and I was kind of blown away. The first time I heard it, which rarely happens. Like, to me, there are definitely a lot of songs that I love and like, but usually it takes like a couple listens for them to kind of grow on me and realize that, oh yeah, this is great. Like, every once in a while there is a song that grabs me right off the bat. And this one grabbed me for two reasons. One, it's just like a really good song. But the other reason is because, like I said, I was in the middle of teaching the course, and it had so many of the things that I was just talking to my students about. And I don't want to get into intentionality. Did they do it on purpose or did they not do it? I was hoping to get one or more of the writers on this stream. They're super gracious and nice people, but unfortunately it didn't work out to have them on here. So I'm not going to get into whether or not whatever they did was intentional as a hooking technique, or whether it just kind of flowed out of them. Because first of all, a lot of these things that we talk about, they do come naturally, and a lot of the writers don't necessarily think about every one of the things that they do in a conscious way. And usually it's kind of a mix. Some things they think about, some are kind of like happy accidents, and so I don't want to attribute intentionality unless it's something that's like very, very obvious. Like, for example, Taylor Swift using melodic previews and like half of her songs, stuff like that. That's pretty obvious. The other reason I don't get into intentionality is because to me, it kind of doesn't matter. Oh, there's two more people. Intentionality doesn't matter to me because the effect, whether it was intentional or not, doesn't change. And the reason I pointed out is that you, or my students, or whoever I'm talking to about it, can use it in an intentional way, whether they learned it from someone who used it intentionally or unintentionally. The effect is still going to be there. And the advantage of being aware and being able to use it intentionally is that once it becomes part of your toolbox, then you don't have to rely on the idea just coming out of the ether for you to kind of use it, but you can kind of consciously use it in an appropriate moment. Excuse me. So if you know me, like, once I kind of decide that I like a song and I want to kind of dig further into it, first thing I do is I do this. I load it into my Variations audio timeliner. For those of you not familiar with it, super helpful software. It's free. I believe it's open source. It can be kind of a pain to install it and get it to work if you have a Mac, but it is possible. And it's just been one of the most helpful tools that I've had. So to start, I'm going to just play it. And again, if this ends up on YouTube, I'm going to cut off the part where I play the whole song because YouTube's probably not going to like that. But just for us to kind of listen to the song, familiarize ourselves with it. And if you are a past student in my course, or even if you're not, but you have an idea here of what it is to you that resonates with you, or that makes the song so successful and catchy, I'm happy to make this a conversation rather than me kind of talking at you. So I have my notes and my list of techniques that I want to point out here that have been used, but I'm also open to hearing from you and what you've come up with. So let's start again by listening to the song, and then we'll kind of open up the conversation. right, what a song! What a song! Tugs at your heartstrings. All right. Does anybody have any before I start kind of spouting off my comments? I'd love to hear your input, your suggestions. You can either speak it or write it in the chat, and if not, then I will start. Yes.
Yeah, just something because I've never analyzed the song, but for example, the last chorus, the last part when he sings that higher octave, to me it was unexpected for the harmony or the instrumental part to come later. No, sometimes in some songs it happens like one beat after the lyrics start, but in this case it was more, so it was unexpected to me. But I think it's
that's a good observation. So one of the things that happens in the song is there are two different chord progressions. One is more static, and let me show this. So I just transcribed. This is the melody here, and this is those kind of blue turquoise-ish blocks represent the more static kind of chord progression, which is like 2 bars E minor and 2 bars D. I didn't transcribe the whole chord progression. I just thought it was unnecessary and cluttery. And then the other one is more dynamic, which is kind of a climbing chord progression. So there's kind of a back and forth between them. And in the first half of the first chorus, they use this kind of like static chord progression. Let me just play the track here.
Of the ordinary, I want you laying me down till the day.
Right, there's 2 bars of E minor and then 2 bars of D. Whereas in the second half of it, there's kind of like dun, 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 much quicker.
Of the ordinary, you got me kissing the ground of your sanctuary.
And even in this part where it's like 1 bar and 1 bar, it's still quicker pace-wise than this. So there's a big contrast between the chord progressions. So, they move between having like this chord progression without a bass at all. So that's why I put these kind of like empty. So there's the chord progressions, but without a bass. And then having the same chord progressions, relatively static chord progression with a bass, and then that dynamic chord progression. And they move back and forth between them. And what they do in the second half of the last chorus, after having kind of a mix in the first half of that chorus between the 2 different chord progressions, they mix up the 2 different chord progressions in the first half, which they hadn't done before. They either did like 1 half this way and 1 half the other way. So they do that. And then in this one, in order to kind of create the contrast and create the climax, they delay it by 1 measure, and then these notes, which were 1, 2, 3, 4 notes over 2 measures, they're kind of compressed into 1 measure. So there's 1 empty measure, and then they instead of this, right? Now there's this. There's an empty measure, and then all these are quarter notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, and that creates a really huge climax, which they needed. Like, one thing you want to notice about this song is that it does have the chorus takes up a ton of real estate, and it needs that real estate because it's a very elaborate chorus. Like if you have a chorus like let's say Chappell Roan's Pink Pony Club, it doesn't need a ton of real estate, right? Because it's very repetitive. The melody is repetitive. The lyrics are repetitive. Pink Pony Club, I want to be gone dancing in the Pink Pony Club, right? So it doesn't take that much real estate in the song, relatively speaking, because the little real estate it takes is more than enough for you to memorize it and sing along to it and have it be stuck in your head. This kind of chorus is a more elaborate chorus, more in the vein of let's say Taylor Swift's Blank Space. There's a lot going on there. And in order for the listener to kind of take it in and internalize it and be able to kind of sing along to it, move along to it, you have to give it a lot more real estate. Now, the other side of giving something more real estate is that if you do it too much, it can get stagnant. And so the way you resolve that is you change things around it. You change the context around it. So one of the things they did is that shift in chord progression. So short chord progression and the production overall. So this is the first chorus. Oh, sorry.
My love.
Right? Sorry, that's not the chorus. I'll take it from here.
I take one look at you, you're taking me out of the ordinary. How would you laying me down till we're dead and buried? On the edge of your knife, staying drunk on your vibe. The angels up in the clouds are jealous knowing we found.
Okay, so that was one half of the chorus. Now they're going to repeat that melody, alter the lyrics. So that's one alteration, one way they're going to repeat it, but make it still fresh because the lyrics are going to be different. There's some lines are going to be the same, but a lot of the lyrics are going to be different. But also going from this static chord progression, and let's hear it side by side, going from this static chord progression to this dynamic, and focus on the chord progression here.
Staying drunk on the vibe. The angels up in the clouds are jealous knowing we found something so wild of the ordinary. You got me kissing the ground of your sanctuary. Shatter me with your touch. Oh Lord, return me to dust.
All right, and that's by the way, when I said the melody is the same, it's not exactly the same. I was overstating the sameness because in the second half of the second half, you do have an alteration. So this is the second half of the first half.
On the edge of your knife, staying drunk on your vibe. Shatter me with your touch. Oh Lord, return me to dust.
Right, so that's one difference that kind of extend that. Another difference is the difference in octave in the octave range. I think you mentioned that, Jacopo, between the first half of the chorus and the second half of the chorus. And a third difference is that cadence. Let's listen to that cadence in the first half.
The angels up in the clouds are jealous knowing we found.
Versus here.
The angels up in the clouds are jealous knowing we found.
There's two. This is what we call, and this is another one of the techniques that we talk about, is the directional pattern. What is the directional pattern? Is like when you kind of I'm blanking on a word now. When you establish. When you establish a pattern that has a melody and a rhythm to it, it doesn't have to, it can be lyrical, but let's say in this case, it has a melody and a rhythm, and then you play that same pattern on a different step. So this is a subtype of it. We call it in classical theory, we call them melodic sequence. But you can create directional patterns that aren't necessarily melodic sequences. That's for maybe a different session. But in this case, it is the melodic sequence. So it starts with this, da 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 da, right? E, F sharp, E, da da da, A, and then A B A B A B D, right? And then so the second time they take this same thing, and then they start from the same melody as this, and again, it's over a different chord progression. So they start from the A B A B A B D, and then they continue. So they take that and they just like push it up another fourth, and to the degree that you could like literally harmonize them. Like if I took, I can like literally copy and paste this thing. I'm gonna delete it afterwards. But if I just put it right here, solo this. Right? They could harmonize each other. So, and then they take it another step. So those are ways of creating contrast between the 6 different iterations of that melody of the chorus. So you hear it a lot of times and it takes a lot of real estate, but by changing the chord progression, changing the vocal range, changing the lyrics, changing some of the melodic lines, you make it so much more palatable and so much more powerful. Because that's what we want as listeners. We want to hear the same thing, but feel that it's different, feel that it's fresh, because then it sounds familiar. Kind of the balance between familiarity and freshness. So that's one thing. So thank you, Jacopo, for your observation. Is there anybody else who wanted to? Yeah, Jerry.
I noticed that picking pattern, that arpeggiated deal, and the intro goes all throughout the song. It's just a bed for literally the entire song.
Sorry, can you repeat that? I'm having a little trouble hearing you there.
Sorry, I'm in a vehicle trying to talk while I'm driving. But
Okay.
that picking pattern and the intro, I know it changes with the chord progressions, but the as far as the notes, it's like a sequence. But the pattern itself of the arpeggiation goes throughout the entire song. It's kind of a bed for the entire song.
Yeah, it's what and I always cite Logan from the Vibe Machine because he has this term, the underlick, and it's sort of an underlick for this song. So yeah, I think that's a really good observation. Julie is asking, would you also say that melodic harmonic divorce is at work in the chorus when the chord pattern switches up? Yeah, I would say so, because you have the same melody over completely different chords, and it's not that now the notes sound different, sound like they have a different function. They, like, consonant notes become dissonant or something like that. It just sounds like the same melody with kind of a different flavor to it because of the incorporation. So yeah, anyone who's not familiar, harmonic melodic divorce is the theory that I didn't come up with that. I forget who coined that term, but it's a term that's been around in music theory for like a couple of decades now. And the idea behind it is that while in the past, let's say, 100, 200 years, 300 years, the melody always related to the chord progression. That means that if the note of a specific note in the melody was a chord tone, then you could use it however, you could jump to whatever you want. Once you go into non-chord tones, it's not that you can't use notes that are part of the chord, but you treat them as dissonances. So, for example, if your chord is a C major, you can go like, C, E, G, whatever, in every direction that you want. But if you're going to use D or F, you use it in a certain way. You can use it as a neighbor tone, so going up or down or up, or you can use it as a passing tone, or you can use it as a paggiatura. There's all sorts of suspension. There's all sorts of like ways to treat a dissonance. But the harmonic melodic divorce, what it says is basically the melody is on its own. Like, you create a chord progression that's in the key, the melody's in the key, but it doesn't rely on the chord progression. And what that enables you to do is it enables you to, let's say, repeat the melody several times with different chord progressions underneath it. And it doesn't sound like you altered the function of the notes. It just sounds like a melody that's repeated 3 times with different flavors. And the reason you can do that, one of the reasons you can do that in popular music, is because you have lyrics, right? Because when you have lyrics and the lyrics change, you have one melody and then you repeat that melody with different lyrics, and you repeat that melody again with different lyrics. So that's like a AAAB or AAC. Then you kind of create an independence to that melody, and it just works. I can't really explain. It's sort of like it's one of those things that's sort of like the blues, because it's done a lot and you get people's ears used to it, and that's kind of how things come together. So in blues, you can have like a major third in the chord and a minor third in the melody, which on paper would be very dissonant, but it works. So yes. So the short answer is yes. I have a question about the Prince theory. Is there Prince theory here? I'm not sure. I would characterize it as a Prince theory, but I do think there are some fragments there, and you can actually see. I mean, there's something to this. By the way, hi Phil. Phil says that's him under a different name. Hi Phil, glad to have you here. If you look at kind of the whole verse to chorus thing, oops, you can see that the verse and the chorus look fairly similar. So I would say that There is an element of the Prince theory. It's not that the melody is identical, but there are certainly things that are previewed. Like I noticed, like, and this is one of the things I noticed, is that this fragment,
And this town's lost its faith, our colors will fade
is very similar to the ordinary.
of the ordinary. And this town's lost its faith of the ordinary till we're dead and buried.
Right? There are some differences. The rhythm is different. He doesn't go all the way down to the D. Da, 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 da. He doesn't go da, 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 in the same way that this fragment goes. So there are similarities. And these similarities, even though I wouldn't quite characterize it as the Prince theory, I think it's significant. And I think that's part of the reason, again, whether it's intentional or not, part of the reason the second verse is not identical to the first verse. Because I think because of these similarities between the verse and the chorus, and remember the pre-chorus fairly short, so you have a lot of real estate for the same notes, even though in the second half of the chorus they go up. So I think that's one of the reasons having a different verse, a second verse, is kind of a breath of fresh air, because you had this long chorus. Before that, you had a verse with fairly similar notes. The pre-chorus, you had the contrast, it went up. But the second verse all of a sudden gives us something completely different.
Hopeless, hallelujah, on this side of heaven's gate. Oh, my life, how do you breathe in?
Right? And another thing it does is that it kind of features that choir that they recorded there. And it gives it, even though that choir is very present in the choruses, it kind of features it even more in that verse and really adds it as a significant part of the vibe of this song. And then it has kind of a very intense moment of melodic repetition.
Take my breath away. At your altar I will pray. You're the sculptor, I'm the clay. Oh my, you're taking me out of the...
Right? And now, notice that in the first chorus, he had octave down and then octave up in the second half. In the second chorus, it starts with the octave up.
Taking me out of the ordinary.
And that chord progression, but it still uses the lyrics of this first half, right? So now you have this first half in the kind of sonic context of this half that starts here. So there's kind of a gradual buildup of intensity here. Jace is saying, I thought it was really interesting how the second half of the second verse also served as a pre-chorus. Yeah, that's a really good observation, and I thought about it. So it's like there's no separation here between the verse and that second half of the verse. So it's kind of continuation or intensifying of the verse. But that's a really, really good observation, because what happens here is functionally, even though technically it's part of the verse, is functionally a pre-chorus. You have this end of the second verse.
Breathe in, take my breath away. At your altar I will pray. You're the sculptor, I'm the clay. Oh my, you're taking me out.
And not only that, this oh my, it recycles the oh my from the first pre-chorus. So here we can already start the color coding. Let's do that, right? And then you have another oh my, I believe here in the bridge, which we didn't talk about. So this is another technique that we just call recycling, where you have the pre-chorus.
Oh my love.
Right, and then it's a different type of pre-chorus. It's technically part of the verse, but it functions as the pre-chorus. So that build up to the chorus.
Oh my, you're taking me out.
And then in the bridge, it's a kind of bridge that like keeps up the intensity. You also get that oh my, I believe it's in the middle.
Something so heavenly, higher than next to the sea. Whenever you're next to me, oh my, what was it?
So this is a recycling of a lyric. We often talk about, for those of you who were in my course, we talk about like melodic recycling, but certainly lyrical recycling is just as effective a technique. And And it can be used in the context. It can be used in addition to melodic recycling or instead of it, etc. Jackie, yeah,
Can you hear me okay?
yeah, hi.
Okay. Hi. Yeah, yeah, just like on the note of the verse and the pre-chorus, I find it interesting that I think it was Jace that noted that the verse in the second verse, that it just kind of goes into the pre-chorus. But
Yeah,
looking back at verse one, it's like we've distinguished them like verse pre.
yeah,
But it's always interesting to observe this like relationship between like what we can observe after the fact of the song being written and then like when they wrote it
yeah.
in their minds. Are they probably in verse two? They're maybe going, oh, and like the pre-chorus will go like this, but it's just, I don't know, it's interesting like the difference between process and then analysis and like what we perceive.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I don't have anything intelligent to add to that. I think it is fascinating, like the process of what came about intentionally, what came about as an accident, or what came about intentionally, but from a different angle. Like I can think of something, oh, this is here because X, and whoever, the people who wrote the song might be thinking this is here because of Y, and it works anyway. It works in any case, but
Yeah.
it's very interesting. The first pre-chorus is pretty easy to distinguish as a pre-chorus just because of the separation. There's the vocal separation. There's the my. It's like it's pretty clear that the verse ends here and the pre-chorus starts here. Whereas that second verse, let's look at it. A little bit more just so we can see it. Okay, so this is the second verse. The kind of separation in vocal range actually happens early, where it's still but because it's a repetition in a different octave, then you don't feel like, okay, this was the second verse and this is the pre-chorus, obviously, because it's the same melody just in a different octave. And then this kind of flows into that, even though it kind of dips down.
Right.
It just kind of flows into that in a way that the verse and the pre-chorus here were much more separated. Let's listen. So we don't know.
Place, hallelujah, on this side of heaven's gate. Oh, my life, how do ya breathe and take my breath away? At your altar, I will pray.
Right, I mean, up to here, da, 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 da. It's the same phrase still, and now there's just kind of a repetition of that cadence. So, again, it's one of those things that technically it's part of the verse, but yeah, functionally here we are in a pre-chorus.
Yeah.
And I think, sorry, go ahead.
I only bring it up just because it's like you've brought this up a few times, just like, and it's stuck with me that like we are looking at theory, right? We're literally building theories off of finished products, and that always stuck with me because that idea of like reminding myself of that is like what has often helped me try and push myself towards originality.
Yeah.
Of like the period of exploration where I just kind of go shoot my shot and then look back on what have I done and then theorize about it and say, is there something I can improve? It's just that kind of back and forth conversation is always fascinating to imagine on finished products that you have no part of.
Yeah, I love that, and I think this is a very good approach and healthy approach. And I might have mentioned this to you in the past, but one of the things that stuck with me that my composition teacher in my undergrad, his name is Ruben Sarusi, he told me, you're probably never going to reinvent the wheel, but you always have to feel like you are reinventing the wheel. Like you always,
Yeah.
And he gave me kind of, back then, because it was like a classical program, we talked a lot about classical music. He gave me the example, like look at Mozart and Haydn. They both write in very, very similar style, big picture, right? But they're both kind of like the same time period in the classical period where the musical kind of guidelines, or the stylistic guidelines were like fairly strict, like the sonata form, almost every piece that sort of the same thing in terms of like leading the exposition to through the development and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of tropes like the Alberti bass. So a lot of the pieces use the same kind of tools. But still, if you are even vaguely familiar with classical music, you hear a Mozart piece and you hear a Haydn piece, you immediately recognize it. Even though it's not like today where you have like different singers with like different vocal timbres and different, different lyrics and different personas, it's much easier to distinguish it. But, even like you hear a piano sonata by each of these composers, you can fairly easily distinguish between them. So I like what you said about, kind of always exploring and then kind of revisiting and seeing what you did. One thing I will add to that is that even when you're talking about the theory, I think one of the things that's helped me is like becoming comfortable with having more than one quote unquote correct answer to something. So like we talked about here, it's not that, okay, this is definitely a verse and there's no pre-chorus, or this is definitely a verse and a pre-chorus. It's not one answer. It can be like, to me, I'm comfortable with saying, okay, this feels like a verse to me, but this part feels like it functions like a pre-chorus. That means it's both things are correct. Like it's both a verse and a pre-chorus at this point, and I'm like 100% comfortable with it. And I think this is, one of the things that helped me kind of solve a lot of problems that seemed very difficult to solve previously. I have a couple of things. Jerry, it's just a couple of comments by Jerry. Like word glue. I think he was mentioning the lyrical recycling. Okay. So let's get back to this. And what else do we have? Okay, so we talked about recycling. Talked about the melodic previews. That again, it's kind of a pseudo melodic preview. I'm going to color code that, where they kind of sound similar. The directional pattern. Now, one thing that actually, when I posted about this, like one of my students, who is in my advanced chorus, she's like, "Oh, there's probably like syncopating over chord progression here, right? Because that's the new technique that they learned this month." And so, yes, there are, but it's interesting to look at the progression of this technique. So just to kind of explain it briefly to those who are not familiar, when you syncopate the melody, you notice that a lot of melodies in hit songs, they're like they have an attack at the end of the measure, and they kind of hold it over or stop the note over the one in order to create, and what that does, it kind of creates a bounce, because what it does is it accents the part of the measure that has the most tension in it, and it kind of holds over it, and while the meter kind of resolves the tension, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, and the melody kind of holds over, and it just kind of creates this sort of feeling of a bounce, right? So it makes the melody kind of almost force you to move your body as you're listening to it and hopefully singing along to it. But in this song, because it kind of intensifies and intensifies and intensifies, the effect of the use of that type of melody evolves throughout the song. So if we listen to, there's a syncopation over the one in the verse, but the effect here is pretty minimal because we don't have a bass and we don't have a chord change here. Let's listen to it.
They say the holy waters watered down.
Holy waters watered down. One, right? So there's kind of a stopping. There's an attack at the end of the measure, and then there's nothing at the beginning of the measure. But the effect here, it's present, but it's still fairly minimal. In the pre-chorus, it's kind of similar.
Oh my, oh my.
Right? One, oh my, one, right? So far we had that, it creates kind of a bounce. But now we're going to hear it intensified. So after the word ordinary, so here there's no chord change, but there's a very strong hit on the one right after the word ordinary.
You're taking me out of the ordinary.
So the ordinary, boom. Now you hear that effect of the tension being resolved with the drum hit. So you get that bounce a lot more than you get here. Let's hear it one more time.
You're taking me out of the ordinary. I want you laying me down till we're dead and buried on the edge of your knife.
Right? So that kind of intensifies the effect. But where it becomes the most potent is the second time in the second half of the chorus, and then like later as well, because now you don't just have that drum hit, you also have a chord changing, and that really intensifies that effect. Let's take it from here.
Yeah, there's no one we found, something so wild of the ordinary.
The ordinary, boom. Now the chord is completely changed. So let's kind of listen side by side to the effect of a melody ending at the end of the measure, or a phrase ending at the end of a measure, with the one following it between the verse, the pre-chorus, the first half, and the second half of the chorus.
Holy waters watered down in this. Oh my, you're taking me out of the ordinary. Something so wild of the ordinary. You got me kissing the.
I know it's kind of hard, but maybe you heard that kind of progression of intensity of this specific technique here, which again I wouldn't ascribe intentionality to it, but just because it's kind of one of these things that would happen naturally if you intensify the beat under the chorus, and then you intensify the chord progression. And in the beginning, you keep it very minimal in order to enable that big buildup. So that's kind of a naturally occurring intensification of the same kind of technique that's used. Who can tell me what structure the chorus is in, or each half of the chorus? Just visually. Come on, a lot of you took my course. You got to remember this visually.
I can't remember the term, but
What's the structure that has this fragmentation here? In the third.
Is it sentence structure?
Yes, it's the sentence structure. Thank you, Phil. All right. Yeah, this is the sentence structure, and the sentence structure is basically A. I'll just write it out. A, and then little a's, and then C. And those of you who knows me, they know I even though there's no B here, I like to label the end of a section or a subsection as C, just because, like, to me, that represents a cadence. So this little a's are basically melodic fragments that are derived from the big A's. Now, one thing to note about the sentence structure, or basically the repeating A's. Someone mentioned the harmonic melodic divorce previously, and this is an important part of it, because if, again, going back to a Mozart or a Beethoven or a Brahms, when you have an A and then you repeat an A that has a different chord underneath it, then the melody adjusts to that chord. There would be different notes there. Like rhythmically, it would be the same. The melodic contour would be very similar, but the melody would adjust itself to the chord. Because of the harmonic melodic divorce, now we can have the same melody repeating twice over different chords. So when you have it's a true AA. Like sometimes you see in classical music, it's AA, or sometimes they'll do A prime. So they'll be similar. They'll have, like I said, similar rhythm and similar melodic contour, but they're usually not going to be the same if there's a different chord underneath them. In pop music or popular music in general, you'll have identically melodic A's with, again, different lyrics. Okay, so we have to kind of distinguish the melodic structure from the lyrical structure. So here, even though there's subphrases, you can hear that each of these halves are connected into a larger phrase.
You're taking me out of the ordinary.
Right, that's one big phrase with two subphrases.
I want you laying me down till we're dead and buried.
Right, now we have fragmentation, which is you're taking a fragment of the melody from here and turning it into a full phrase. So those phrases are not connected in the same ways that those are.
On the edge of your knife, staying drunk on the vibe.
Right, the repetitions, and sometimes the analogy I give is that if you kind of think of phrases as little people going in a certain direction, where you have two phrases that are connected like this A, like these two subphrases. So it's one looking this way and the other one completing it. So they're kind of opposite, looking at each other. And then the same thing happens here. But then in these other like little A's, they're both going in the same direction. So this is going here, and this one is continuing the journey in the same direction. So it's a different type of relationship. So you have the big A, the two little A's, and then the cadence, which is the
The
directional.
angels up in the clouds are jealous knowing we found something so wild.
Right? So that's a sentence structure. And, it's a really good structure to know. I don't usually ascribe I don't really usually describe structures as hooking techniques, but in reality, it's all hooking techniques. And in reality, it's all meant for listeners to be able to take it in, to feel like a sense of tension and release, to feel a sense of anticipation. So all these things, when I teach, I have like specific hooking techniques, like the directional pattern, the fuel core, the phrase syncopation, all that kind of stuff. And then we have like a separate thing about structure, a separate thing about like harmony. But in reality, they're all hooking techniques. Even rhymes are hooking techniques. We just don't think of it as hooking techniques because everybody does it. Every song has rhymes, and even songs that have like 3 listeners, they also have rhymes. So rhymes are hooking technique. They're just not enough. You need other stuff to go along with it. All right. So we talked about harmonic variation. We talked about recycling. Oh, just another little thing to kind of point out is that the title of the song, a very central word in the song, is a multisyllabic word, which is by itself a hooking technique. So you have lots of songs like that kind of build on that, like Senorita, like Umbrella, like Trampoline, like Levitating by Dua Lipa. So having that word and kind of arriving at that word. Also, I'm not by any chance, by any measure, like a lyrical savant. So, but as someone who struggles with lyrics, one thing that I think helps is if you want to say something, say it, and then find 4 other different ways to say the same thing, and then choose from that. and I think usually you'll find you don't choose the first thing you said. Like you kind of like escalate and escalate and escalate until you reach something that is not the first thing that popped into your mind, so that it's probably going to be kind of more unique, but also more emotionally out there and emotionally vulnerable. Which I think the song, I don't know if necessarily the word ordinary, like out of the ordinary. I mean, the phrase "out of the ordinary" is something that gives the song a lot of emotional weight. And I think the music that goes along with it like adds to that way. I mean, I think the lyrics and the music really complement each other here beautifully. But yeah, something like that, like like a love that's out of the ordinary. It's a way of saying something that a lot of songs say, but saying it in a way that other songs didn't say it exactly in that way. And then like crafting the song around it, I think that really helps the song be like super successful. All right, should we talk about? Oh, got a couple of things to point out. Again, if you took my course, you might have noticed it. And if anybody has any other observations, I'm happy to hear. But one of the things to point out is in the chorus, we've talked about saving the high note for a second half of a section or a subsection. In this case, if you look at the first half of the chorus, just this.
I take one look at you, you're taking me out of the ordinary. I want you laying me down till we're dead and buried.
Okay, up to here, the melodic peak was this F sharp, and he keeps hammering that F sharp, but it's kind of like bumping against the ceiling. F sharp, F sharp, F sharp. And then in the second half of the chorus is when he goes to like a new melodic peak, which is the A, and then in the cadence starts climbing up. Oh. Oh, that's not what I meant.
I take one look at you, you're taking me out of the ordinary. I want you laying me down till we're dead and buried. On the edge of your knife, staying drunk on the vibe. The angels up in the clouds are jealous knowing we found.
Right, that gradual climbing of melodic peak. So again, it's not something you have to do in every song and in every chorus and every section, but it's like saving a melodic peak for the second half or toward the end of a section. It can be a really powerful tool if you're trying to add kind of the level of, it's kind of vague, but to say it, but kind of a level of like vulnerability and emotionality to it. You hammer up against a note and you find a breakthrough. There's something there that I don't know if I'm doing a great job articulating it, but it's something there, and it's something that works a lot of the time. It's like, okay, this melody sounds a little static, a little needs something, and oftentimes, okay, here's the second half of it. Let's bring that note up, and all of a sudden, like, things open up. So something, again, like I said, to keep in your back pocket. The other place where that happens is in the bridge. You can see the first half of the bridge. It's, again, hammers against that F sharp. And the second half, it's going to hit the A.
From this so heavenly, higher than next to the sea. Whenever you're next to me, oh my, my. What was in black and white until I saw your light.
Da-da-da-da. First time we hear that A in the section. So another kind of new melodic peak in the section. Yeah, Jackie.
It just reminds me a little bit of, like, it feels like what you're talking about is directionality, but like in the same way that your arches kind of have multiple scales. It's like directionality but played out over sections rather than like melodic increments. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes, so in this case, there's definitely directionality because it goes, if you look at the chorus, it has that initial melodic peak in that F sharp, and then like the next section, it goes to the A, and then it does that climb. But I think it, sometimes it works even just like having one new note in the second half. It can just open things up. But certainly, like if you look at the shape of this song, like the melodic shape of this song, this is like from the blue is the verse, the green is the pre-chorus, and the first half of the chorus, the second half of the chorus is here. Like you can see there's kind of a directionality to it. The verse, the pre-chorus goes up, then you temporarily go down, but you go up again. So this is kind of a large scale directionality. And then on a smaller scale, you go back here to that F sharp and break through to the new melodic peak and then go up. And if you look, even the larger kind of shape of the song, and I know it's hard to see when you're looking at all these different notes, you can see patterns, although you can also see that a lot of things kind of stay consistent. So there's kind of like connecting patterns between them. There's a direction going from here to here. But I think part of the reason you have things that are consistently in the same range, like the bridge is in the same range as the chorus because it maintains that kind of intensity, and the first verse is in the same range as the first half of the chorus and the first half of the last chorus. Also, I think it's just the nature of the song. It's like so anthemy. So when you have a song that's like this anthemy, I think it helps to kind of, get to your high level of energy and then ride it for a while. And I think that adds to kind of the feeling of, because like an anthemy, it feels like it's something that you sing together. It's like, even though the song is very intimate, just because of the sound of it with the choir and everything, and kind of pulling the listeners in as part of the story, I think that anthemic character of the song and the way these things are kind of consistent in the range, it like helps the energy of the song. It helps kind of get it into the character. Did we forget anything? We talked about contrast in pitch. Maybe we can point out some other contrast, let's say. One contrast that, fairly basic that we talk about is, how the verse starts on a pickup. So first verse starts on a pickup.
They say the holy water's watered down.
By the way, this was a pain in the butt to transcribe because of the triplets in it. Because it's like 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3 1 2 3. Like if I was going to write it in finale, there's no problem. I would say 12/8, but Ableton does not like anything else in 3. So the verse starts on a pickup, and then as a contrast, the pre-chorus starts after the one.
A masterpiece. Oh my love.
And then the chorus again goes back to being on a pickup.
A master.
Oof. How do I get it to just start where I am?
A masterpiece. Oh my love. I take one look at you, you're taking me out of the ordinary.
And by the way, it starts on a pickup, but there's such a strong hit on the one that I feel like it almost feels like you start on the one, even though technically you start this phrase. This is what we call like a flow phrase, right? Because the phrase, this phrase here, it's after the pre-chorus already finished its job. Oh my love. But it really is not yet part of the chorus. That's why I color-coded it orange.
I take one look at you, you're taking me out of the ordinary. How would you lay me down?
Right? So contrast in where things start and end, contrast in length of phrases. You can see that there's, again, between the verse and the chorus, there's quite a few similarities, but once you get to the pre in terms of the phrasing of things.
Holy water's watered down, and this town's lost its faith. Our colors will fade.
Verses.
A masterpiece. Oh my love.
This is like almost, it's again subdivided into two sub phrases, but they're really part of one drawn out thing that leads us to this flow phrase into the chorus. So the pre-chorus is it's a very unique pre-chorus because usually pre-chorus is longer and you have more than just like, this is a very simple phrase, like a repeated lyric, oh my love, and that's all the contents of the pre-chorus. Usually pre-choruses are more kind of elaborate leading up to the chorus. But again, in a way, even though there's a distinct separation between the verse and the pre-chorus, it sort of does something similar to what happens here. This functions as a pre-chorus, even though it's technically part of the verse, but it just kind of quickly takes us to the chorus. Again, part of it is because the chorus needs a lot of real estate here. And you don't want the song to be like 5 minutes long. And so, yeah, you gotta get to it quickly and give it the real estate. And I think they did a really good job of getting into it quickly and having effective pre-choruses that are also short. And the verses are also fairly short. So you got a lot of real estate here. All right, did we forget anything? I don't think I have anything more in my notes. Probably after we finish here, I'll be like, oh, I forgot like 1, 2, or 3. But if anybody else has any more, yeah, Jackie.
It was just going back to the thing you were saying about lyrics earlier. There's in a lot of sessions like a lot of people like get in the booth or on the mic and just like sing melodic ideas and then start writing. So the melodic ideas, I've always I come from like just like writing on acoustic guitar. That's where I started, and so melody has always come with lyrics. So there's always been like that process of. But it's interesting what you're saying of like rotate words, come up with like other concepts, and I find what's interesting about that is this song, for example, like the cadence of the way he says ordinary, like informs the rest of the song, and it informs like the concept, like an extraordinary love is kind of like extraterrestrial or whatever, and you have this very spacey kind of ethereal vibe to the song, and it's just an interesting like counter approach to let's sing a bunch of melodies and make words fit to that. There's options, you're automatically like I mean, you're always kind of excluding other options whenever you make any commitment, but it's an interesting alternate approach, I find.
Yeah, I am, well, me, I feel very comfortable with like melody, with structure, with chord progression, all that kind of stuff. I have a much harder time with lyrics, and I have a much harder time with lyrics when I have to fit them to a melody. I know other people are different than me. There are other people who are much more comfortable with lyrics, and they have lyrical idea, and they're also younger than me and more kind of in tune with the culture. I'm like, I'm not there anymore. But like to me, fitting, and I've tried this before. I still try it because sometimes I have melodies I really really like, and I want to fit something in there, and that's to me something I often struggle with. So to me, it's easier to, like you said, come up with a melody and the lyric. The lyric itself, like when you come up with the lyric, it already has kind of a rhythm. I mean, you can alter the rhythm, you can stretch, but once you come up with the lyric, with a hook idea, with like a lyric that you want to be central to your song, it has its own internal rhythm. Now you can bend it, you can alter it, but it already has something. So once you have a rhythm, then a melody becomes, like to me at least, the melody becomes much more easier to kind of dress that rhythm in, rather than the other way around. Just like a feel chord. You can have like the same rhythm in multiple different hit songs, and has different melodies. It's just dressed in different.
Yeah, and I find at that point, like everything can kind of point towards serving that rhythm, serving that idea, kind of gives you like a compass or a direction.
Exactly. All right. Anything else we want to comment on? Right. Well, if not, then I think we'll end here. And hopefully this was illuminating. Like I was very excited about doing this and about doing this song because, like I said, it's one of these songs. It's not every time I hear a song that I end up loving that I love it from the beginning. Like usually, like songs grow on me. I'll hear it here and there on the radio or whatever, like a few times, and then it'll start growing on me. But this is one of the signs where a song kind of like hit me like right here. Right off the bat. So I was, and not only that, like sometimes it hits me like this right off the bat, but then when I dig into it, like, sometimes I'll find like one or two things that are interesting to say, but sometimes like I love a song, but I don't have like a lot of interesting things to say about it. In this song, I felt like there's so many things that are like intellectually interesting, in addition to just kind of the fact that it hit me, that I was very excited to do this. And I will do some more of these. I think I'll try to do a couple more maybe this month, some other songs. So stay tuned for that. Thank you, Jace. Thank you, everybody. And yeah, thanks for coming. Appreciate it.